Could President Trump really be planning to seize Greenland? In January 2025, the incoming president caused an international stir when he explicitly refused to rule out using military force to take control of the Danish territory, which he sees as vital to US security interests. But while many believe the comments are harmless hype, others see a dangerous intent to the threats. So, is Trump really serious? And what would be the consequences of any military action? And is there in fact an option that would potentially give Greenland what it wants and Trump what he feels he needs? Hello and welcome. If you're new to the channel, my name is James Ker-Lindsay, and here I take an informed look at international relations, conflict, security and statehood. We live in an era in which many long-standing rules of international relations are increasingly being challenged. One of the most important of these is the principle that state borders are sacrosanct. The modern international system is built on the principle that countries will respect each other's territorial integrity. Apart from a few notable exceptions, this principle has in fact held up remarkably well since 1945. Across Africa, Asia, Europe and the Americas, there have been remarkably few wars of conquest over the past 80 years. However, this understanding is now being challenged as never before. As well as Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we're now seeing increasing threats from Donald Trump. In the space of a few weeks, he's made explicit claims against Canada and Panama, and now he's threatening NATO ally Denmark over Greenland. Greenland lies between the Atlantic and Arctic Oceans. To its west, Canada's Ellesmere Island is just 26 kilometres or 16 miles away. Iceland is 740 kilometres or 460 miles to its east. At 2.2 million square kilometres or 840,000 square miles, Greenland is the world's largest island. The island's population is around 56,000. As 80% of the country is covered in ice, most inhabitants live along the coastal regions in towns such as Nuuk, the capital. Almost 90% of the population is native Inuit origin, and the remaining 10% or so is made up of Danish or mixed heritage. Greenland's history begins around 4,500 years ago when the first settlers arrived from North America. Despite the harsh conditions, they survived until the 11th century when the ancestors of the modern Inuit population arrived. While the first Norse settlers also came from Iceland around the same time, they disappeared by the 15th century due to the worsening climate conditions and conflict with the Inuit. From there, the next stage of the story begins in the early 18th century when the Danes began arriving. As a result, Greenland became part of the joint state of Denmark-Norway. This lasted until the union ended in 1814. Under the terms of the Treaty of Kiel, which ceded Norway to Sweden, Denmark retained control over Greenland. Over the next century and a half, Denmark consolidated its control over Greenland. However, the outbreak of the Second World War created a strange twist to the story. In 1941, following Denmark's fall to Nazi Germany, the United States stepped in, overseeing the territory for several years and establishing an important airbase. While Denmark retook control at the war's end, the US base remained in place, becoming an essential intelligence, early warning and refueling facility throughout the Cold War. In 1953, Greenland's colonial status was abolished and it formally became a Danish province. Then, in 1979, it was given self-rule. Most recently, in 2009, local power was expanded to the point that Greenlanders now control most aspects of their governance, including health, education, natural resources, and the local economy. Although Denmark continues to manage foreign affairs, security and defence, and provides around a fifth of Greenland's income with a yearly grant of around $500 million, the islanders had their own political institutions. This includes a separate Prime Minister, executive and Parliament. Although close ties still exist between Greenland and Denmark, there have been growing calls for independence in recent years. As many see it, it's time for the territory to become a separate sovereign state. However, balanced against this, there are deep-seated concerns about Greenland's viability as a country. Despite its vast resources, its small population and continued economic reliance on Denmark mean many are cautious about breaking away. In this sense, independence has long been seen as a longer-term goal rather than an immediate priority. But in recent years, this debate has started to change. Alongside broader geopolitical developments, environmental factors have also altered the calculations. As global warming sees Arctic ice melt, the country is becoming an increasingly significant point in new shipping routes. Likewise, it's also making previously hard-to-reach resources more accessible. And it's against this backdrop that Trump turned his attention to Greenland. I hope you're finding this useful. If so, please consider giving it a like and perhaps subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks so much, and now back to the video. In December 2024, the President-elect posted a message on his social media platform stating that the United States considered ownership and control of Greenland as essential for its national security and freedom. While the comments have gained a lot of attention, coming against other threats to the Panama Canal, Mexico, and even Canada, this isn't, in fact, a new idea. Trump previously proposed purchasing Greenland in 2019 during his first term in office. However, the Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, dismissed the suggestions as absurd, a response that saw Trump cancel a planned state visit to Denmark. But while officials from Denmark and Greenland have again rejected Trump's calls, insisting that the territory isn't for sale and that it belongs to the people of Greenland, there are fears that something more dangerous may be at play. This was highlighted in the first week of January 2025 at one of Trump's press conferences. When specifically pressed on the issue, the incoming president pointedly refused to rule out military action to seize Greenland. While it may be tempting to put all this down to Trump's usual bluster, there are in fact good reasons to worry. First, the comments seem to have a far more serious and calculated intent this time. As observers have pointed out, while such statements may have seemed like idle ramblings during Trump's first term, they now appear to have a much more serious focus. Senior figures point to what they believe are genuine security concerns over Greenland's status, especially in the changing geopolitical context. As they see it, the territory is vital for reining in Russian and Chinese activities in the Arctic. And it's this realization that Trump, in fact, seems to be serious about his wish to take control of Greenland that explains the strong international responses to his latest comments. As well as firmly rejecting the claims, Denmark has recently increased its defence commitment to Greenland, although it stressed that this had been previously planned and isn't sufficient to ward off any US attack. Meanwhile, several of Denmark's key European partners have also come to its defence. For example, both France and Germany have insisted that Greenland is subject to the European Union's mutual defence provisions, even if EU officials have so far taken a more cautious line by refusing to be drawn on what the Union would actually do if Trump acted on his threats. So, could the United States take control of Greenland? Leaving aside the question of why it needs Greenland, given that Denmark is a NATO partner and that it already has a base in the territory, there would be several ways in which it could potentially happen. Despite the military threats, the most obvious route would be to acquire the territory peacefully, perhaps by purchasing it, as Trump has suggested. However, Denmark couldn't just sell it. The decision would require Greenland's approval. This would likely require promises of significant public spending. But even then, the territory's exact status would have to be worked out. Full federal statehood would obviously be out of the question. While geographically large, Greenland's population is tiny. Instead, it would have to have another status, rather like Puerto Rico or other US overseas territories. But this would create other questions. Even if the money flowed in to start with, would it really continue? Many might view Greenland's present place under Denmark as far better in the longer run than under US control. But say this effort was unsuccessful and that Trump decided to push ahead with an invasion. What would happen then? Regardless of the challenges or otherwise of seizing the territory, the diplomatic and political implications would of course be huge. Any attack on Greenland would be a direct strike against a NATO ally. While there have in fact been tensions between alliance members in the past, such as Greece and Turkey, this would be the first formal attempt by one member to seize territory from another. This would open up all sorts of complex debates and questions, and if nothing else, would create an unprecedented crisis within the organisation. But even if NATO can't act, there's the question of what Denmark's EU partners would do. It seems inconceivable that they would respond militarily. Instead, it's much more likely that they try to pursue strong diplomatic, political and economic measures, such as imposing sanctions, assuming, of course, that countries like Hungary, which has built a close relationship with Trump, don't try to block a joint position. The problem is that then the US would retaliate. This would almost certainly lead to a fundamental breakdown of intra-Western relations. Either way, one could potentially see Trump using the opportunity to withdraw the United States from NATO, as he's repeatedly suggested he could do. Of course, this is a worst-case scenario. But even if it doesn't go as far as this, Trump's statements are still extremely dangerous. Even if some dismiss them as silly, attention-seeking comments that are best ignored, they normalise the idea that states can threaten to use force to seize territory. All this will have worrying knock-on effects. If Russia and the United States can talk freely about seizing land from other countries, then it seems only a matter of time before others do the same. This will return us to the might is right power politics of a previous era marked by regular wars. However, there may yet be an option that's acceptable to all parties. Within international relations, there's the concept of free association. This allows small independent states to develop a formal relationship with another larger country to oversee their foreign and defence policies. The United States already has such agreements with the Marshall Islands, the Federated States of Micronesia and the Republic of Palau, all of which are separate UN members. This could well be an option for Greenland as well. Indeed, at least one of Greenland's political leaders has already raised the possibility of pursuing this relationship, perhaps even in conjunction with Denmark, a system that would create a unique hybrid model. Overall, this could work well. It would give Greenland the independence that many want and the security and support that many others feel the country would still need. At the same time, it would give the United States direct control over important aspects of security and defence. The question, of course, is whether this would be enough for Trump, or whether his real ambition is to bring Greenland wholly and entirely under US control. But of course, Greenland isn't the only claim that Trump has made. Here's another video looking at his recent threats to seize the Panama Canal.